The Edmonton Oilers picked up yet another good win over the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we are here to break it all down. Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get in on the NFL action with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, today's show, breaking down what was a quality victory against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Going to tie it back to the shutout loss to Vegas a few weeks ago. We're going to talk about it in terms of one game, the standalone, and then, of course, we'll look ahead. Minnesota tomorrow, try and get our lick back there. This was tight. This was as about a tight a hockey game as you're going to get in 2020. Now, today's league, and this has been a statistical trend on a macro level. This isn't just the Oilers. This is a league-wide level. There has been a real targeted shift and a real change in defense and goaltending. And the data bears it out because it is harder than ever to turn a scoring chance into a shot on goal. A scoring chance can miss the net. It can be blocked. A shot on goal obviously has to hit the net, be on goal. We are seeing the lowest conversion rate of scoring chances into shots on goal this season ever, as long as we've been tracking the shot tracking data. And last night's game is a really good example of that. You win what is ostensibly a really close game. You know, we'll talk about what Jon Cooper said a little bit later, but as far as the game itself, I think the simple matter of the fact is you went out there and you played a game commiserate with the quality of your opponent. And the Oilers have had issues against teams that are in playoff spots so far this season. They've definitely, they've lost to Vegas twice. They lost to Winnipeg. They lost to Minnesota. They definitely have some work to do as far as elevating, raising their game. But last night, again, very similarly to the shutout loss against Vegas, this feels like progress. The fact of the matter is you were able to play what is a good team. I know I was a bit skeptical about Tampa Bay coming into the season. I had some questions about their depth. But they've got two really quality scoring lines. You think about all the guys on Tampa Bay who got invited to participate on Team Canada, like Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli. You've got Point, of course, you've got Kucherov, and you've got Victor Hedman playing defense at a really high level for the first time in 2 or 3 years. And all of that together, that's more than enough to be categorized as a good team. You know, Tampa Bay will have issues come the playoffs. That's kind of been the issue the last 2 seasons is they have enough talent most nights to beat mediocre and bad teams, and that's enough to get you in the playoffs. If you only beat the bottom half of the league and you split with like your division opponents who make the playoffs, that's more than enough to get you in. You know, you play 82 games, you play the bulk of them against your conference, the bulk of them against your division, and if you win the right games, and even if you're not a great team, and I don't think Tampa Bay is a great team, but it's really interesting because 3-4 weeks ago, it really felt like the Oilers were just going to perpetually be stuck. They were going to be rolling the ball up the hill indefinitely, like Sisyphus and the Myth. There was going to be a real, well, we won a game, and then the next game you kind of sulk your shoulders and you realize, well, we're not really making as much progress as we need to. But the last 2 weeks in particular, and this game is a good encapsulation of that. You know, you kept Tampa Bay to under 10 shots on goal per period in this game. To be in the mid-20s for shots on goal against in today's NHL, I know what we said about scoring chances, and we'll talk about scoring chances versus shots on goal in the game in a minute, but if you can play defense to this degree, and look, did they get a little bit outplayed in the third period when Tampa Bay was chasing the game? Yeah, Tampa Bay had the puck a little bit more, but you would expect that. In a one-goal game, you're going to expect the team that's trailing to be pushing a lot harder offensively. They're going to, and then in relation, the defensive team, in this case, the Oilers, is going to be a bit more conservative. They're going to be okay with the other team taking low quality scoring chances, shooting from distance. The Lightning had twice as many scoring chances as shots on goal. That tells me two things. Number one, it tells me that the Oilers are playing quality defense because A, they're either blocking the shot outright, or B, and more often, because you're not blocking 20 shots in a game, more often, it means you are forcing the other team to take low quality chances. When you keep them to the perimeter, to the outside, that's typically going to commiserate with the other team missing the net because it's more difficult to turn that shot on goal, that scoring chance, into a shot on goal and into a goal. If we're talking about it in the hierarchy, a scoring chance is the lowest, a shot on goal is the medium, and then of course a goal is the most valuable. But a shot on goal, getting through to the net, is harder than ever this year. The defenses are better. The goaltending is better. And with all of that, the Oilers, as maligned as their defense has been, it's playing better. And it's really simple. The Oilers were not nearly as bad as they played the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, and they're getting some positive regression. I didn't feel like the Oilers played incredible last night. We'll talk about the Jon Cooper quote, which I found very funny, in the next segment, but at least you feel like the Oilers are making progress. You didn't have a Stuart Skinner stinker. You didn't have a Darnell Nurse breakdown. You went perfect on the penalty kill again. I know the power play went 0 for 2, but you went perfect on the penalty kill. You got a McDavid goal. You got a Draisaitl goal. And sometimes that's all you need. This was what you would categorize as a low event hockey game where there wasn't a whole lot going on. And when you have a roster designed the way the Oilers is, the low event style game can really work in your benefit because when there are fewer overall plays of note, of substance, each individual play is more valuable. For example, if both teams have 50 shots on goal, one of those isn't going to be that valuable. But if both teams only have 25, 22, one shot on goal becomes a lot more valuable because it's a bigger percentage of the overall game. So in a tight checking, in a low scoring, not a lot of offense style game like last night, each individual chance becomes more valuable. And when you have the high end talent that the Oilers do, when you have McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Ekholm, Hyman, when you have that much high end talent, it's a lot easier for those guys to swing a game in your favor. And I'm not saying that this is the Oilers' best recipe for success because I don't necessarily trust their defense and goaltending to be this good all of the time. This is one of the permutations out. We talked about that hierarchy, the pyramid of success for the Oilers, where the baseline was winning the McDavid and Draisaitl minutes, and then it was special teams, and then it was defense, and then it was goaltending, and then it was depth scoring. You got the foundation. You got McDavid and Draisaitl goals. You split on the penalty kill PK, but you didn't score on the power play, but you didn't concede anything. So special teams is a wash. You played good team defense last night. You only conceded 22 shots on goal against. That's a good night. Goaltending, you only conceded 1 goal against. That's nice. You didn't get any depth scoring, but you got 3 of the 5 prongs that you need to be successful against a good team that has talent and isn't anything to slouch against. And even if Tampa Bay didn't play their best game, you still got to play the game. You can only play who's on your schedule. You do not owe anyone anything. The Oilers don't owe the Lightning the ability to play their best game to judge how the Oilers are making progress. The Oilers are undoubtedly making progress as a team as this season goes along. That said, we're going to take our first break on today's show. And when we come back, we'll dive into what exactly Jon Cooper meant. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. This week, we've got some good games in the NFL. Tomorrow night, good Thursday night game. The Rams and the 49ers both fighting for their playoff lives. The Rams heading down to Santa Clara to take on the Niners, where the Niners are 3-point favorites. And then best game of the weekend, potential for best game of the entire regular season. Josh Allen and the Bills coming off their heartbreaking loss to the Rams, heading to Detroit to take on the Super Bowl favorite Detroit Lions, where the Lions are 2.5-point favorites, and the over-under in that game is 54.5. You can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. Usually like to do these game episodes right after the game, but last night watched the game out, didn't get home until pretty late, and figured it was better for me to wait till I was conscious and could formulate some good ideas as opposed to rambling. And look, I love rambling. I do as many podcasts as I do because I love to talk, but I want to give you something to get out of this. These episodes, especially after a game, it is quick hits. It is, what do I need to know? That's the way I always try and formulate these shows, is if I didn't catch the game, what would I want to know? What information is pertinent to me as far as the individual game, the team's recent form, and then their overall narrative? That's generally how I try and structure these game recap episodes, for lack of a better word. And I don't really go into the buildup of plays, describing the goals, whatever, because I'm assuming you either watch the game and or B, you would rather just go watch the highlight. Sure, sometimes I'll diagram something because I find something interesting or think it's emblematic of a larger pattern. But for the most part, I structure this in a way that I feel would benefit me if I didn't get a chance to watch. So building off of that, there are a lot of different ways to approach hockey in today's league. There are a lot of different styles of play. There are a lot of different philosophies, if you will. And we talked in that first segment about low event hockey, where if both teams don't generate a lot of offense, the chances that are generated become more valuable. We see that strategy a lot in football, where if you're playing a really high-powered offense, your team is going to be more inclined to run the ball, to keep the clock running, to shorten the game, so that both teams have fewer possessions, so that one or two plays are ultimately what's going to swing the game. And when you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, you can do this. Not every team in the NHL can do this. There's a reason the Carolina Hurricanes are such a volume-based offense, because they don't have a McDavid or a Draisaitl. I think Aho and Svechnikov are really good players. I don't think either of those guys is a top 30, 40 player in the entire NHL. So you have to have a more volume-based approach. You can't play lockdown clamps and have not a lot going on, because those guys aren't going to be able to score as many low-quality chances. So the Jon Cooper quote I kept alluding to, but I want to read because I found it very funny. That was a bad hockey game, actually, by both teams. There was a lot of talent on the ice, and I don't think either team had it. I think that's very interesting and a really honest look. And obviously, a coach doesn't always give you everything he's thinking. There are certain factors to consider. Jon Cooper's not going to blame his guys. He doesn't want to hurt anyone. You don't want to throw anyone's feelings under the bus. You don't want to crap on your team. You don't want to make anyone feel bad. And what was a close game? It's a 1-goal game. All you need is one bounce, one save Stuart Skinner doesn't make. You get to 2-2, you at least get to overtime. But I do think it's telling that Jon Cooper felt like his team had more to give and weren't able to do it. And I don't think the Oilers played an immaculate game. I would say they probably played about a B- game, but the Oilers B- game is more than adequate against most teams in the NHL. If the Oilers B- or even C+, if you really want to listen to Jon Cooper, if their C+ can beat the Lightning, I would be absolutely terrified to see what their A+ looks like. And we keep alluding to it. The Oilers are going to add to this roster. They just have to figure out where and what they're going to add. We still don't know about Victor Arvidsson. The early reporting is that it's going to be at least another week till he starts skating again, maybe 2. And then there's a chance he can return before the Christmas break. But as far as the game, as far as the big picture, you want to keep making progress. We keep talking about this idea of building along as the season goes. And the Oilers have definitely taken their fair share of lumps, and they are not as poor of a hockey team as they played as earlier in the season. And I think you're getting some positive regression. And I don't think the Oilers are this good defensively. The results have started to stabilize and correct themselves, but I don't think we've played enough of the season to really get a particularly detailed or accurate picture of what they are. I do want to do an episode, and it'll probably be tomorrow before the Wild game. That'll probably be what we talk about, is how the defense is changing as the season's gone along, break it down into like 10-game pockets and really try and pick apart what's different as far as usage, as far as who's playing with who, responsibilities, because I think that's the bigger picture story to take away here. If the Oilers with this defense, with these 6 guys, with Emberson and Kulak, Stetcher, Nurse, Ekholm, and Bouchard, if the Oilers can play this good of defense with those guys, and they can drop somebody else in here, like maybe a William Borgen or pie in the sky Rasmus Anderson, who knows? If you could do something like that, the potential for a really scary team starts to manifest itself. And I still think the Oilers are probably better suited for high event chance trading hockey than low event like they played last night, purely because it puts a lot of responsibility on the goaltending and the defense. Against a lot of teams, the Oilers can get by with what they had last night, and that's more than enough most nights. But in the playoffs, when the other team has the big dogs too, and look, nobody has as much firepower as McDavid, Draisaitl, 1-2. I don't want to hear about McKinnon and Rantanen, Matthews and Nylander. I don't want to hear it. This is the best 1-2 punch in the entire NHL, period. But one other thing I did want to hit on in this game about this game, the Oilers' fourth line, or makeshift fourth line, was actually really good last night. Derek Ryan, Connor Brown, Corey Perry put together a really strong fourth line performance in terms of scoring chances. And you hear me talk a lot on the show about the low event game, especially from your bottom 6 guys. Because if nothing happens when Perry, Ryan, and for last night Connor Brown are on the ice together, if nothing happens in those minutes, you take that as a coach. You know, if you're laying out your trade-offs, if we have nothing happen in the bottom 6 and we think our big dogs, our top 6, are going to win their minutes every night, you take that 100% of the time. There is no equivocation, no argument. And in fact, the Oilers did a nice job when that line was out there of actually maintaining puck possession, of forcing the other team to waste energy. And that's really one of the signs of a strong depth line. And that could be a third line or a fourth line. But if you can make the other team play in its own zone, and I want to read the numbers. Yeah, they had 70% of the scoring chances in their minutes last night, if I remember correctly. 77.78. Yeah. Connor Brown, Derek Ryan, Corey Perry played .416 last night. They outchanced Tampa Bay 7-2. Podkolzin and Draisaitl and Kapanen outchanced opponents 10-8. Those two will play. If you can get that type of aggressive split, especially without McDavid, and then if you really need to play McDavid with Hyman and Draisaitl, you start working out the permutations and the math to how they need to play most nights. And it's really tantalizing. And the opportunity to really build something is special. And the grind, there's so much time. There is a lot to figure out. But if you can keep stringing together these types of performances against quality opponents, and Tampa Bay is a quality opponent, that is where you can start to differentiate yourself and start building yourself up internally, and then change your perception around the league. Because if you can consistently beat the Tampa Bays of the world, you play in these 1-goal games at Vegas, you play Minnesota really well tomorrow. If you can string those types of performances together and you have the feeling that you can play with anybody, that's a dangerous feeling to have as a team, and something that's really important as a team with Stanley Cup aspirations. We're going to take one more break on today's show. When we come back, we'll look a little bit ahead to the game against the Minnesota Wild coming up next. Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, for any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can win up to 200 times your money on PrizePicks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select player projections are discounted up to 25%. This week on PrizePicks, you can look at the hockey board tonight. We've got Rangers Sabres in a stoppable force versus a movable object game. You could do something like Artemi Panarin, more than one assist, Tage Thompson, more than 2.5 shots on goal. It's so simple to make picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today and collect the offer with code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks. Run your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Wednesday midweek edition of Locked On Oilers, where we are recapping the 2-1 win over the Tampa Bay Lightning on Tuesday night. And Minnesota is a God's honest gut check. The last time you played them, they kicked your butt. And Minnesota is a good team. If we were doing the pecking order, and Hunter Hodes and I are going to talk about this tomorrow on Locked On NHL as well, when we're talking about the pecking order and where people are right now, the Wild are the best team in the Western Conference. They have the most points, and they have shown when they have Kaprizov buzzing like this, he's one of the 5-10 best players in the world. You know, last year, going into the 23-24 season, I think I had Kaprizov ranked 6th or 7th in my top 20, and I feel reasonably confident in saying that Kaprizov might be the best winger in hockey, and his performance so far is Hart Trophy caliber. And Minnesota's young burgeoning core with Brock Faber and Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi, they have slowly but surely integrated quality young pieces into their lineup. Jared Spurgeon is healthy. He's on pace to obliterate the games played he had last year. You still have Jonas Brodin kicking around, who's a high-quality defensive defenseman, somebody who really sticks out in my mind how he's consistently played the Oilers well in his NHL career. And Minnesota is a tempo team. They play really fast. They try and put you on your heels. They force you to play active defense, you know, very similar to what the Oilers try and do when they are at their apex, when they can go up and down, back and forth, and really put heat. Because if you make the other team actively play defense more often than they make you play defense, you start to wear down their goalie. You start to wear down their players. It's more off. You have a better opportunity to score goals, to draw penalties. All of that is interconnected and really creates a kind of synergy to your team style. And when it's going right, like it is for Minnesota right now, they really are buzzing. And they have some swagger to them, some confidence to them. And you can throw Philip Gustafsson, their goalie, in there as well, who had a really good season 2 years ago, really struggled last year, and looks to be an every other year goalie, which is an interesting phenomena. You know, Jacob Markstrom comes to mind as somebody who has been an every other year of his career type goalie, where for whatever reason, it is only every other year where he plays at a high level. But all of that put together, and the Wild really clearly have something they didn't have the last couple of years. You know, sitting at 19-5-4 through 28 games, they're 7-3-1 at home. They're 7-2-1 in their last 10. They have a plus 22 goal differential. They are dominating opponents and playing at a really high tempo. And tempo is something that you're not really going to be able to pick up unless you're watching a team on a consistent basis, because it's not something the casual numbers do particularly well. You know, if you go by the rate of scoring chances, Minnesota's relatively middle of the pack. You know, they're 21st in scoring chances per 60 at 5-on-5. But when you get under the hood and you go a little bit deeper, you get a really clear understanding that their defense is elite. You know, they concede 2.01 in expected goals against per 60, which is the best rate in the entire league. So you don't even necessarily need to play at the most breakneck of pace to counterbalance that. But the simple matter of the fact is, when their big boys are out there, when Kaprizov's out there, Boldy's out there, it's kind of like Steph Curry, where no matter where they are on the ice, you got to be aware of them because they're going to gouge you. They're going to hit you. And when you are playing a team like Minnesota that is really well structured, that has its game going and really well, it means you're probably going to be out of your element a little bit. If you're the Oilers, you're going to probably have to try and get this to a low event game. You want to play this game in the neutral zone as opposed to your end. That's a meaningful concession. There are times where you're going to cross center ice and you're going to want to carry that puck into the offensive zone. And this applies to everybody other than Connor McDavid. Connor can do whatever he wants with the puck because he's the best player in the world. But everyone else, you get that puck across center ice. Maybe you send that puck in and you live to fight for the next play. Because if you turn that puck over in the neutral zone, they're going to get you going back the other way. And these are the types of trade-offs that make hockey really interesting from a philosophy and a strategy perspective, because you don't talk about football like this. You don't talk about basketball or baseball like this. Your approach in hockey is almost entirely fluidity and based on what you're getting. In football, it's really simple. You drop back as a quarterback. You have your first, second, third reads. If you can get to the third read, that is. Most of the time, the way offenses are designed now in football, you have two reads. You're getting that ball out as quick as you can, or you're taking the check down because the pass rushers are so good and the offensive lines are so poor. Basketball, you have certain spots you're trying to get guys to who hit from those spots. Basketball is almost reached its maximum efficiency. And then in baseball, you're getting up there. If you're a guy who walks a lot, you're trying to get on base so somebody who hits home runs can hit the ball out over the fence and give you 3 runs in one swing. That's the most efficient way to play baseball right now. And in hockey, we don't have that near that peak efficiency. There is still a lot of empty calorie offense. There is still a lot of low quality offense that is just a foundational point of the game, of guys just throwing pucks at the net to see what happens in hopes of creating a rebound or a deflection. And the other sports don't necessarily have that. And it creates a weird, it's a weird comparison for someone like me who's really well versed in all of them. Because when I compare them in my head, I think like, no team's letting Derek Ryan shoot the puck 3 times in a game if this is basketball. That would be like letting, I don't know who's a bad 3-point shooter, big man. That'd be like Giannis taking 4 threes a game. That's a waste. That's not his game. You tell Giannis to get down on the block and put his back to the basket and bully whoever's trying to defend him because he's the biggest and strongest guy on the floor. And it's what makes hockey really interesting for me. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Tomorrow, we'll do defense. I really want to dive into the numbers and try and see where the split between the first 10, 20, 30 games is. Before we get out of here, I want to thank everyone. Listen to today's show. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you listen on Apple or Spotify, give the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes live. Thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert. Get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I will talk to you guys ahead of the game against the Wild. Until then, let's go Oilers.